Om Jnanatirandhasya Jnananjana Shalaka Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I've been introduced as a direct disciple of Srila Prabhupada. That is undoubtedly my great undeserved fortune. But more important than being a disciple of Srila Prabhupada is being a follower of Srila Prabhupada. Usually these two terms are disciple and follower are used interchangeably. But it's not necessarily that everyone who took initiation from Srila Prabhupada is following what they vowed to follow, unfortunately. And apart from those who are direct disciples of Srila Prabhupada, there are many followers of Srila Prabhupada. Even though they may not be personally initiated by him, they may be initiated by some of his disciples. If they're following Srila Prabhupada, that's a very good position to be in. One does not achieve the perfection of life simply by sitting in a ceremony, an initiation ceremony. That's also an important part of one's progress toward the perfection of life. As Srila Rupa Goswami begins the list of 64 parts of bhakti, bhakti-angas, by saying, Tasmat Guru Padashraya, then one should take shelter of the lotus feet of a guru. Krishna Diksha Anushikshana, and one should take initiation. The second item is that one should take initiation and learn from him. Anushiksha means also we can learn from those who are his followers. And Vishrambhena Guru Seva, that one should with affection and respect serve the guru. So it's not that the taking diksha is unimportant, and having a guru is important. But more important than having sat in a ceremony of initiation is to follow all the rules and regulations and all the directions given by the guru. And the gurus who are following Srila Prabhupada, they should teach their disciples to follow the same thing that they were taught. This is the meaning of Perambur. So in that way, there should be many generations of followers of Srila Prabhupada, even though not everyone is directly and personally initiated by him. In the Gauriya Vaishnava Sampradaya, in which Srila Prabhupada is a guru, a very prominent acharya, all the members are called Rupanugas, which means followers of Rupa Goswami. And a term has been coined in the modern age, Prabhupadanuga, follower of Srila Prabhupada. So, the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sampradaya, the Gauriya Sampradaya is called the Rupanuga, not the Chaitanyanuga. Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he personally didn't write any books. It's said that he wrote by hand one copy of Bhagavad Gita. That's still said to be in existence. But as far as original compositions are concerned, there's Shikshashtaka, and some other verses are found in Chaitanya Charitamrita that are composed by him, said to be spoken by him. Of course, he is the giver of all the Vedas, and any inspiration anyone has to write anything about Krishna or about anything else for that matter comes from him. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto mataspriti jnanam apohanam cha. From Krishna, within the heart, comes knowledge, remembrance and forgetfulness. And that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna. Ya atmanta yami purusha itisyo samsa vibhavaha. He is described in Chaitanya Charitamrita as the Paramatma in everyone's heart. That is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But still our Sampradaya is called Rupanuga Sampradaya because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his teachings, which he intended to be composed into books, were principally given to Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. Even though Sanatana was the elder brother of Rupa, Rupa was considered the leader of the Gauriya Vaishnavas, so our Sampradayas, because he gave the instructions on behalf of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, therefore we are called Rupanuga Sampradaya. But there's so much to give, so much to write, so much to say. It's not possible to say everything or write everything for one person. Vyasa gave a massive contribution. But even that, to fully understand it, then the commentaries of further acharyas are needed. And the real essence of, what is the essence of Vyasa's contribution? That is Srimad Bhagavatam. Sarva Vedeti Hasanam Saram Saram Hidaharitam. In Srimad Bhagavatam, it is described about Srimad Bhagavatam that it is the essence of all the Vedas, Puranas, Itihasas. But to understand that properly, in its full, the actual essence of that, then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to explain it. That is why Srila Prabhupada begins his written commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam with the introduction consists of an overview of some of the pastimes of and the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was personally relishing the rasa which are described in Srimad Bhagavatam. In Srimad Bhagavatam, in the beginning, Vyasadeva recommends Pibata Bhagavata Rasamalayam. Just drink this nectar, rasa of Srimad Bhagavatam. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was doing that. Actually, that essence of Srimad Bhagavatam is mentioned, but in a somewhat cautious manner. In a less cautious manner, the later manifestations of Vyasadeva later expressed that in a more explicit manner. And one of the pillars, or maybe the essential text in Gauriya Vaishnavism over the centuries has been the Gita Govinda of Jaidev, which explains in more detail the rasa dance or the meeting and the pastimes between meeting and separation of Radha and Krishna. So this simple text, in many ways very simple, simple in the matter the storyline is not very complex. It's not complex like Mahabharata. Mahabharata can get very complex, isn't it? You have one story within another story, within another story, within another story. Sometimes you forget who's speaking and what's going on. And then the stories themselves are extremely complex. But the storyline of Gita Govinda is very simple. It concerns the intimate relationship between Radha and Krishna. And there are maybe 45, something like that, commentaries on it. And in Bengal, which is you could say the homeland of Gauriya culture, the whole culture was, in Bengal, Manipur, the whole culture was based around this. Especially around the remembrance of dramatic performance of songs about the relationship between Radha and Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he personally relished especially the compositions of the Gita Govinda of Jayadev and the songs of other Vaishnava poets, especially Bhavabhuti, Chandidas, the Krishna Karnamrita of Leela Shuk, and a work that was contemporary of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at that time, Rai Ramananda's Chaitanya Vallabh Nartakam. So it's a very extremely exalted subject matter, which from external vision appears to be it's romance, or you could say sex sexual matters. But of course the great acharyas who commented on that, they never thought that Krishna's pastimes are some mundane, low-class sexual matters. The acharyas, who are Vaishnava acharyas, they are of the purest and highest consciousness. They have no interest in anything of this material world. So they would not waste their time, or they would have no attraction for that which is low class and vulgar. They're not even interested in the what you might call the high class non-Krishna consciousness. There are great Sanskrit poets. Kalidas is maybe the most famous. But the Vaishnava acharyas, they're not interested in commenting on Kalidas's works. In recent times, there have been great Bengali poets, among whom most famous is Rabindranath Tagore. There are others also. The Vaishnava acharyas, they are not concerned with their works, even though they may be poetically very beautiful. Even some of the songs or the poems by Rabi Tagore or Kavi Nazrul Islam, they're also about Krishna. It's another thing. Bengalis may know. You heard that name, Kavi Nazrul Islam? It's a famous poet, modern poet, obviously from Islamic background, but he wrote poems also about Krishna. But they wrote some poems about Krishna and then so much about so many other things. They weren't Vaishnavas per se. But in a culture where Krishna is so prominent, they also wrote something about Krishna. But Vaishnavas, no, they write about this, that, something else, and also something about Krishna. They're not Vaishnavas. Something just like nowadays, modern Hindu also. They'll watch TV. They may go to see the cricket match, Chennai Super Kings. They may take their family out to some Subway or McDonald's or something like this. And they may also sometime go to the Krishna temple and say, or to the Vaishnava temple, and then they may say, Om Namo Narayana. So because sometimes they go to the Vishnu temple, it doesn't mean that they're an authority on Bhakti, Krishna Bhakti. It's just something in their life which is probably not as important to them as the Chennai Super Kings. So that these poets, they may write something about Krishna or Rama. That doesn't make them, even it's very poetic, it doesn't mean that they're actually Vaishnavas. So the Vaishnavas, their subject is Krishna. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was relishing these Vaishnava poets, their works, even though from a mundane poetical perspective, of course, even from mundane poetical perspective, these were excellent poets, but someone might think that someone else is as good or maybe even better. But great Vaishnavas, they're not interested in these works primarily because of their poetic value, but because they are pure glorifications of Krishna. So even though the subject matter to a mundane person might seem to be mundane, as it's the love affairs of Radha and Krishna, the great Vaishnavas, they know that this is totally spotless and beyond any mundane consideration. One time in Puri, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was close to the temple and he heard some very sweet recitation of Gita Govinda. And he found it so sweet and attractive that being overcome with ecstasy, he ran toward the sound, wanting to embrace the person who was reciting. And he was so overcome with ecstasy, he didn't see the path, he was just running through the thorns and everything. Thorn trees were cutting his body. His servant Govinda was with him, as usual. He was with him most of the time. So Govinda could understand that the singer is a woman. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in such ecstasy, he couldn't differentiate. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was running to embrace the singer. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is a sannyasi. Of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is far more than any sannyasi. But he very strictly followed the rules of sannyas. So Govinda ran after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and caught hold of him. That's not enough to stop Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Govinda shouted, "It's a woman!" And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to external consciousness by hearing the word woman. But for a sannyasi, the word woman, when it means a mundane woman, it's like hearing something like gunda or lion, something very dangerous. So then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was running to embrace the singer, instead he embraced Govinda. And he said, "Govinda, you have saved my life." Because practically if a sannyasi was to embrace a woman, that would be such a shame. And as in Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, "Sambhavitasya cha kirtya maranadati richate." For one who has been honored, dishonor is worse than death. I said in Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I deliberately said that. Sometimes you were editing, but that wasn't a good edit. So the subject matter of Gita Govinda is the loving affair of Radha and Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was such a strict sannyasi that there's another incident that he didn't interact with women. There's another incident where every year the devotees from Bengal would come to meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Puri. One of the devotees was Parameshwar Modak. Modak means one who makes sweet making. So in his childhood, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to go and take some sweets from him. So by this time Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had taken sannyas, so he must have been quite old, Parameshwar Modak. So when he arrived in Puri, he went to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he told him that yes, this year Mukundar Mata, the mother of Mukunda, that means Parameshwar Modak's wife, she has also come. So that's the system. You don't, in Vedic culture, the woman's name is not said. You say the mother of the eldest son, like that. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he felt, he shouldn't speak to me about a woman. There was actually an infringement of the proper etiquette. But you see, she's an old woman, she's just like a mother in age to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in his childhood, she must have been personally feeding him sweets, all these things. But still, as a sannyasi, he wanted to follow so strictly. And he was relishing Gita Govinda. Nowadays, of course, the culture has changed. I don't think it's for the better, but it's definitely changed. And there's less restriction between men and women, or in any sphere, there's less restriction. So, sannyasis, they may also, not alone, but they may also give some spiritual direction to the ladies like that. But still the system should be, as Prabhupada always stressed, that in childhood the woman should be under the protection of her father, throughout most of her life under the protection of her husband, and in old age under the protection of her eldest son. But Srila Prabhupada always stressed this. This is of course a Vedic injunction. It's not Prabhupada's invention. So the actual subject matter of focus for the Gauriya Sampradaya is the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, that particularly. However, Srila Prabhupada promoted very much the study and understanding of Bhagavad Gita. This, starting from the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he had introduced some caution in entering or trying to discuss and understand the intimate pastimes of Radha and Krishna. Because the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, although they are widely discussed, they were not widely understood. And in the name of Vaishnava Dharma, there were many people who were engaging in illicit sexual activities. That men who became tyagis or women who became tyaginis, they were not strict in their practice, as was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And they took these completely pure compositions, just like Gita Govinda, as an excuse and an inspiration for their own illicit affairs. So, beginning with Bhaktivinoda Thakur, our Vaishnava Acharyas, they saw the need to teach people at a more basic level. And Srila Prabhupada's preaching or spreading of Krishna consciousness all over the world is, of course, the most basic activity is chanting the holy names of Krishna, especially the Maha Mantra. And on the basis, the philosophical basis of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Especially, among the many contributions that Srila Prabhupada gave, one was the worldwide popularization of Bhagavad Gita. By Srila Prabhupada's grace, the Bhagavad Gita is now widely distributed in most of the, or all of the major languages of the world. Well, actually there are some major languages in which the distribution is lagging behind somewhat. Arabic is one of the world's major languages in terms of numbers of people speaking it, but the distribution, although Bhagavad Gita as it is in Arabic has been available for several decades, the distribution hasn't been that much. Similarly, considering the large population of China, the number of Bhagavad Gitas distributed in Chinese hasn't been that much. Of course, there are certain problems connected with trying to distribute Bhagavad Gita in the various Arabic-speaking countries and in mainland China. But the very fact that these books are available in Arabic, Chinese, Farsi is another major language. Farsi, not as nearly as big as Arabic or Chinese, but I guess about 50 million people or 60 million people know that. So the very fact that that's the main language of Iran. So the very fact that these books are available in these languages is because of Srila Prabhupada. And certainly Bhagavad Gita has been and continues to be widely distributed in major languages such as English, German, Spanish, and so on. And in Tamil, Telugu, there wasn't that much exposure in the culture to Bhagavad Gita as there is now due to Srila Prabhupada. So even within India and within Hinduism, the study of Bhagavad Gita has greatly increased due to Srila Prabhupada's propagation of it. And of course, among the great contributions of Srila Prabhupada is not just presenting Bhagavad Gita, but the fact that he presented Bhagavad Gita as it is really the great contribution. Which is, you see, if we say, well, he popularized study of Bhagavad Gita, we could say that's a religious and a cultural contribution. But to give Bhagavad Gita as it is a genuinely spiritual contribution. There might be various Hindutvavadis of various kinds who will appreciate that Srila Prabhupada popularized the Bhagavad Gita all over the world and in India. But they would not appreciate that Prabhupada, he gave Bhagavad Gita as it is, because they say it's too closed. Only Krishna. Whereas Hinduism is more broad. So they think that Prabhupada, they'll praise him for popularizing Bhagavad Gita, but they don't like his explanation of it. So we bow down at Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet millions and millions of times for giving us Bhagavad Gita as it is, which is what we all need to know. The conclusion of which is Manmana Bhava Mad Bhaktaha. Always think of me and become my devotee. It means Krishna. Always think of Krishna and become Krishna's devotee. Srila Prabhupada also gave us Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and other books. Original commentaries. Original means following the previous Acharya, but for the first time ever presented in a non-Indian language for the benefit of people with no previous exposure to this culture. Now, how to think of Krishna and be his devotee, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given the highest example of that. And the followers of Srila Prabhupada, of Rupa Goswami, and of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu aspire not to imitate Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but to follow in his footsteps. But the follow in his footsteps means to come to the level of relishing and entering into Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, especially the Radha Krishna Leela. It's not necessarily that all Gauriya Vaishnavas aspire to for Gopi Leela in Vrindavan. Some may be more inclined toward other Leelas or other forms of the Lord, but all can attain success in their upasana, in their form of worship, by the method given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is the Yuga Dharma of Harinama Sankirtan. So there are many high topics to discuss, the various leelas and bhavs of Krishna and his avatars and his devotees. But the basis and the entry into all of that is the understanding of Bhagavad Gita as it is. So we're very grateful to Srila Prabhupada for teaching us at an appropriate level, at the level that we need to understand. If we discuss a lot about Radha Krishna Leela without having a solid basis in the understanding of Bhagavad Gita, then very soon we'll end up in the same position as those so-called Vaishnavas in Bengal who use that as an excuse to supposedly justify their illicit activities. So as stated in Bhagavad Gita, we should make spiritual progress gradually, step by step. Shanai Shanai Ruparamed Dritya Buddhi Dritya Grihitaya. One should go step by step with intelligence and determination. These practical and realistic instructions were given to us by Srila Prabhupada. So please be a follower of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada said that he will live forever in his books. We can take advantage of the instructions given in his books, become his follower. He is following his guru, who is following his guru. Like this, there's a great following movement, a chain called Perambur. And ultimately that reaches up to Krishna. So if we follow Srila Prabhupada, then we'll go to Krishna. So better to follow him. He taught us how best to follow Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by understanding the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and all these exalted Shastras. Any question about this, please? Certainly we shall attain Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna. We also have to learn how to chant Hare Krishna in a way that is pleasing to Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Niraparadhe nama loile pai premadham. That by chanting the names of Krishna without offenses, we will attain the treasure of love of Krishna. So even some demons, they also chant Hare Krishna. They chant the name of, there's many of them. They call themselves avatars or Bhagavan, and their followers chant some Gopal, this, that. That's not counted as actual chant. We have to chant under the guidance of the proper devotees of Krishna. Otherwise, the demons chanting, they're pretending to be Krishna. Their followers, they think that the so-called guru is Krishna. They're cheating. So chanting, yes, simply by chanting we'll go to Krishna. But chanting is not something that comes out of the voice box, produced by the tongue and the lips and the palate. Actual chanting comes from the pure consciousness. Consciousness has to be purified by hearing from devotees and understanding who is Krishna and what is our relationship with Krishna. Otherwise, if we're chanting Gopal, Govinda, and thinking that Gopal or Govinda is some ugly, nasty, fat, black magician who's now in a wheelchair and will die sooner the better, then that's offensive to Krishna. His black means Krishna is also black, but Krishna is Shama Sundar, and he is Kala Atiya Sundar. So don't be fooled. And don't take Krishna consciousness to be so cheap. I'll do a little chanting here and there and I'll go on with my life. Bhakti means Atma Samarpan, to give ourselves to Krishna. Not that I'll go on with my life as I like and sometimes chant Hare Krishna. That is not Bhakti. Anything else? He said that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu married, when his first wife died, he married again. That's what he said. Yeah. That's true. It's not a question, it's true. If you think that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an ordinary person, then you have not understood Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Krishna married 16,108 wives. He's not an ordinary person. What's the difference between a disciple and a follower? Well, that was a major part of the class. A real disciple is a follower. Sometimes people officially take initiation and then they don't follow. Therefore, I made a distinction between the two. Is some other question? Yeah, Bhagavad Gita is the essential knowledge by which we can enter into the topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah, many people say that Swami Vivekananda, often they say that. He said better to play football than read Bhagavad Gita. Tell them that he was a rascal. He's not an authority on Bhagavad Gita. His so-called guru was eating cow's flesh. Himself, although he was supposed to be a sannyasi, was a meat eater. And although in South India, the Ramakrishna mission sannyasis, because people here know what a sannyasi is supposed to be like, they're vegetarians. But in Bengal, they're not at all vegetarians. In fact, they run chicken farms. So you can ask them when they say, did you know that Vivekananda, he was eating meat? He went to the West and he brought one woman with him. Who knows what he was doing with that woman? Prabhupada went to the West and he brought so many people to spiritual life. So why don't you listen to Prabhupada instead of listening to him? Tell them, you want to follow Vivekananda and be a meat eater? They may say yes. Is Vivekananda's idea, you be strong, and in your next life you become a gorilla, that's all. Because that's what you get. What you want, you get. If anyone, after reading Prabhupada's books, has any sympathy for Vivekananda and Ramakrishna, then they never read Prabhupada's books. Their misinterpretations are so misleading and so bad. They spoil so many generations of people. Krishna says, Savadhaman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Give up everything else, surrender to me. And this Ramakrishna says, Joto mat toto pat. Do whatever it interprets, do whatever you like. As I just said, he was also eating beef. He wanted to show that all the religions are the same. So for some time he practiced as a Christian. And when he was practicing as a Muslim, he had beef, just to show he's a good Muslim. Somehow or other this Vivekananda got a big name. He went to America and gave a few lectures and came back with one woman. And he himself was eating meat regularly, smoking tobacco and everything. So that's, somehow or other people think he's a great spiritual leader, but he was a rascal. And even if you think he did so much for Hinduism, whatever Hinduism means, well, Prabhupada did much more. Prabhupada, he went to the West and he made people into devotees of Krishna. Tell them, they say like that, tell them, shame on you. Who are you to speak anything? Prabhupada, by his teaching, he brought so many people to India. They're from the West, they're wearing dhotis and saris. And you're just a brown-skinned version of a Western man, that's all. You don't even know how to wear it. So you write an article in that Bhagavad Darshan. Don't call it Krishna Darshan. Prabhupada called it Bhagavad Darshan. So don't be more intelligent than Prabhupada. Call it Bhagavad Darshan and say how this idea, you don't have to say the name, but you can say this idea that playing football is better than reading Bhagavad Gita is totally misleading and it's demoniac and we should reject that totally. Hare Krishna. On that blissful note, we'll finish here. It's always very blissful to lambast these demons. So